Hi, this week I went to see Alex Garland's new film Civil War. It's a film that has been something of a hot button issue, people offering a wide selection of their own interpretations of it. It's the story of a group of journalists traveling across country from a nation's uh, most populous and most prosperous city to its capital, as the country is ripped apart by civil war of loyalist and dissenting forces. And on the journey, they encounter various atrocities, a range of characters, soldiers from both sides, civilians keeping out of it, civilians getting involved, and all the horrors that one sees from a war torn region. With, of course, the big twist that the country is the United States. Their journey takes them from New York to Washington via Pennsylvania. Um, the film has been quite divisive, perhaps, certainly controversial because of how it's portraying the conflict. Garland seems genuinely uninterested in the how and the why of the war itself. We're told that the president has disbanded the FBI, launched airstrikes on his own citizens, that there has been an Antifa massacre, although whether or not it was perpetrated by them or perpetrated against them is unstated. We're simply expected to go along with the characters already knowing all about this. Um, but the film is not about the war itself. The film is not about who's right and who's wrong. It's fairly evident that the president is a dictator. The issue is what happens to a country when it reaches this point. Why does a nation tear itself apart, and what are the consequences going to be? The dollar, the US dollar, is mentioned as being now basically worthless. So people use Canadian dollars to trade with. Um, the country's economy is wreckage. There are random explosions going on in New York while the characters are staying in a hotel overnight. It's about what would happen if the divisions in America continue unchecked. And the result is catastrophe of the very worst kind. There are atrocities, there are mass graves, there is ruthless murder of random citizens, even simply foreign correspondents visiting the US from China and Hong Kong are murdered outright by a psychotic soldier. And press put themselves in not just in harm's way, but at the end of a bullet every time they leave the safety of their compound. The film is about the importance of war correspondence as well, the importance of the press, of a free press, and telling the truth about this situation. As our lead character, played by Kirsten Dunst, says, they're not there to pass any kind of judgment or make any kind of statement, regardless of what they personally think. They are there to report the truth and let others make these decisions. So the devotion to telling the truth, to getting the word out, is very much emphasized, as is the way in which these correspondents have to live. Dunst's character has flashbacks of all the people that she's seen killed, that she's been forced to stand by and do nothing more than take photographs as she has to watch people being burned alive. And she watches her protege, a young photographer who's barged in on their journey, gradually become increasingly reckless and desensitized to their surroundings. The two of them travel with another war correspondent and a veteran newsman, each offering a different perspective and a different attitude to their environment. And I found it to be an absolutely fascinating, completely absorbing, completely virtuoso work of a film. It's, I think, Alex Garland's best film by some major margin. Men, I thought, was a very an interesting experimental misfire. Annihilation and Ex Machina, I thought, were very strong. And I think perhaps his earlier work as a writer on Sunshine or 28 Days Later might be superior to this, but this is his finest film as a director. The scale of it is massive, the scope of it is massive. It's nevertheless produced on a relatively tight $50 million budget, which is not much given how huge the film looks. It climaxes with a gigantic battle scene on the streets of Washington, D.C., stretching into the White House itself. And as I was watching it, I felt guilty because of how exciting it is, how thrilling it is, because you're watching the final stages of a war, you're watching people being killed. Soldiers that the characters encounter are never named, regardless of which side they're on. They are incidental to the story because they are ultimately just images and photographs as the characters take their pictures. But it's impossible not to connect this to real life events, to real life conflicts, and to imagine what would happen if that was to happen in your backyard. If this civil war weren't taking place in some faraway desert republic that most people could struggle to find on a map, but is happening in your town, in your street, in your house, if these are the people you know being killed, being hung by their wrists inside a car wash, being dumped in mass graves with disinterested soldiers sprinkling lime on tops of their bodies. It's an incredibly powerful, thought-provoking film made by a director at the top of his game. Dunst's performance is terrific. She has a superb supporting cast. Really standing out in his one scene is an uncredited Jesse Plemons, Dunst's husband, incidentally, who plays that soldier tending the mass grave and is frightening in his intensity and his malice is the wrong word, almost disinterested hatred. But it's a very powerful, very believable performance of what happens in a chaotic situation like this, where you put guns in people's hands and they just go off and do what they want and use the lack of consequences for their own advantage. I'm pleased that it's been as successful as it has been. It's A24's biggest opening weekend, their first #1 at the box office. I doubt it'll outgross Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is their biggest film, but it's certainly one of the best films I've seen in quite a while, the best film I've seen so far this year. It's extremely good. I recommend it very, very highly indeed.